All right, welcome to the Brook Tree Extravaganza. Now, I've been going through this case now for a while, so I'm going to give you the entire case all the way through. I'm going to try to rush it through, but give you the entire meat of this case so you can understand if you have cases going on or other people that have cases going on, you can understand how the system works. This is a complete overview, but I'm not going to go into detail as to the certain applications, operations of mathematical interface on communications. But what I am going to tell you is that math is the only way this all works. Now, we are in the court. Courts are their own little vessels in dry dock. They're managed by the port authorities. Each district court is its own vessel in dry dock, just like if you walked onto a ship down in the harbor and it was from China, you'd be on Chinese territory. Well, each territory in a district court is the same. It's like walking into a foreign country. They can do whatever they want, and if they've established, whatever they want, it's all tomfoolery going around in there. I know a lot of people say no, that's not true. It is. It's absolutely true, and I know because I've tested this theory now for years. Now, not tested it. It's not theory. It is what it is. The fact is, the port authorities do manage the vessels in dry dock, which have their own docking and their own ability to do what they do, which is bond out. People take in business, their accounting, their bookkeeping, right? So they take you in, they bond you because they're not the federal government. They're their own little vessels in dry dock, their own little fiefdoms and they need money. So how do they do money? How do they contract with you? They bond with you. They bond your body out of jail, right? It's used as equity or collateral until they can loop you into a contract because the true creditor is the United States Treasury, right? The U.S. Treasury. The U.S. Treasury has you with a chattel bond, which is your Inslee, your all caps name. That's why when they arrest you, they have an all caps name on there. That's your all caps. That's your commercial entity. But they bond your body out because they don't have the contract with the U.S. Treasury to be able to do what they do, which is pull credit from your account. They have to actually contract with you, and how they contract with you is by throwing charges on you, right? A charge is like a bill. It's like an invoice. This is all charging. It's all banking. So without further ado, that's the bottom line. As soon as you walk into that courthouse, you're on enemy foreign territory, and trust me, it's enemy territory. And then because they're trying to get as much money out of you as they can, that's their business. That's what pirates do. And not to say that all courthouses are pirates, but I haven't seen one that isn't, right? Have you ever gone into a courthouse and actually been treated fair? I rarely. I mean, in my case, okay. Mine goes all the way back to 1987 when two kids jumped me at a prep school, wanted me to sell them drugs because I was the only day student and they were all caught up in this boarding school. And I was the only day student because I couldn't afford boarding school, but I was there for the ski program because I was a mogul aerialist and ballet skier back at that time. But a long story, that was when I was 16 years old. So I went to that prep school as a day student, and then I'd work at nights and was going to school at 16 years old, driving back and forth, doing what I was doing. And two kids like jumped me at study hall. That was the first assault. It wasn't an assault charge, but what they did is they got me into the criminal system at that time. Once I was in the criminal system, what they do then is they start tapping your bond. It's like you're open for business. Once you're in the system, you're basically open for business, and they start tracking you and doing what they do, putting charges on you so they can make money, right? Okay. So with this case, this is about 980 Brook Tree Townhomes. 980 Brook Tree Townhomes, just to give the background, I'm a real estate builder, developer, and I work as a general contractor and a developer. And at this time, back in 2019, right before COVID or right after COVID and going into COVID, right around there, I can't remember exactly when. We have projects all over the state at the time, but the bottom line is another contractor, Blue Sky Development, had requested from me if I could line up some contractors to put roofs on and do all this remodel work on 50 condo units up in Vail, Colorado, which is right across from a big ski area. And that's, those units are about $2 to $3 million probably in value. So about $100 to $150 million project. The renovations were probably about 1.5 million or so is what we were included in. We were only paid about $200,000 of that, less than a quarter million. And we did, probably close to $1 million, $2 million, $5 million worth of work. What did we charge them? We discount our fees to everything else. Pennington Painting, Aspen Development, Jace Management, Blue Sky. Blue Sky ended up suing before we did because they hadn't been paid. They walked off the project, sued. We were all promised that we were going to get paid from Karen Perez, the homeowner association president, and she just kept stringing us along, giving us partial payments, this, that, and the other for almost a year. And then at the end, we just finally burned out. We lost our business, never did recover. And Jace Management had a horrible time, and so did Pennington Painting. And Blue Sky, of course, totally rolled over on them. So the bottom line is they've been sued numerous times before. So Karen Perez had a track history of wasn't so good that came out during this trial. So in that, out of these 30 plus or so contractors that did all this work that were looking to be paid, it started off first with a mechanic. It started off first, 2020, 30 contractors, 4 companies, 1.5 million renovations, paid about 200 to 250,000. But some of these contractors, even though we brought them in under our general contracting and our permitting, their electricians were paid direct. All these other companies were paid direct. We did everything, but the bottom line is some contractors were specialized. So it was a little confusing. And then one of our contractors was sued by the Department of Labor, who I represented to serve notice, just to serve notice. But he was sued for not paying these 2 subcontractors. And he said, hey, I need to get paid from this townhome. And they were like, well, go after the townhome. So that's what he did. And of course, the Eagle County courts, he filed a mechanics lien. I had filed a mechanics lien. A few of the companies filed mechanics liens. They just ignored them. And then they dropped the case, wouldn't let us sue. So that was an insider thing and totally without the due process. Okay. So after that had gone on in 2022, we requested arbitration, mediation, inspection, communication, mechanics liens and lawsuits, everything just dropped, ignored. Okay. So now we're going into 23, 24. We sent 2 notices to the homeowners. So I sent a notice from Aspen Development and one from Jace Management, who was served by a gentleman named Todd Mulligan. He went and taped it to their doors, all 50 of these condo units in Vail, Colorado, taped, right, just to the door, not even a thumbtack, nothing, derogatory or inflammatory, just a notice to stop and correct or we have to sue, right? And when I say we, I mean, it was either Aspen Development, Pennington Painting, or Jace Management, depending on what letter they got, right? Now, the 2 notices happened in December, one happened, and one happened in March of 2025, December 2024, March 2025. Now, the assault, kidnapping, and ransom of my person, Ernest Todd Profit, happened on June 20th of 2025, just outside Denver, Colorado. I was assaulted by multiple officers and taken into jail, taken into custody. I didn't know what for. I had no idea. And so I find out later in September, because I had to wait for the court date and they wouldn't release any bonds. I had to bond out. My mother was threatened. But before that, we had received a couple calls from this guy, Brad Porter, stating he was Brad Porter. First, he called Christine Pearson, the accounts manager for Jace Management, which is another company that I worked with, but don't own or work for. My company's Aspen Development, but I was acting as a general contractor, so I hired all these other firms on behalf of Brooktree Townhomes, Karen Perez, president, who wasn't supposed to be president. They had lost their Department of Regulatory Agency, HOA, Homeowner Association license because she'd been sued and because she wasn't supposed to be an active lawyer and writing contracts. And the 4 contracts that we had and the 3 contracts we still have proof of are the ones that show across these multiple companies that she was committing fraud. So with that said, Brad Porter first called up Christine and threatened her, slandered me, and said, I'm arresting Todd Profit. Where's he at? I'm getting him for assault. And then she's like, what are you talking about? Assault where? Where was he? Where did he assault someone? And then she was like, he's not even in, and then he just explained that he was in Eagle County. And she's like, Todd wasn't even in Eagle County the last like 6 months. What's going on? And I wasn't. I'd been working in Grand Junction. So Grand Junction, Aspen, Telluride area, Steamboat Springs area, but nowhere near Eagle, right? So long story short, and we already had the proof of the service provider. He provided an affidavit. His name's Todd Mulligan. And either way, it's just service. He didn't run into anybody. He said he didn't even talk to anybody. And I believe him, and everybody else believed him because there's no proof that he even spoke to anyone. versus assaulted someone and trespassed on common area, right? You can't trespass in a park. Can't do it, right? Unless it says no, park for after 10 p.m. and you're there after 10 p.m., then that would be an issue. But if there is nothing there in a common area stating, hey, you can't be here, it's a common area 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's what it is. It's a common area. But anyway, so he tried to get me on assault, threatened her with that. Then he calls me after I talked to her. She's like, this guy's calling up. He's threatening to arrest you and you assaulted someone and you're trespassing. And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? I'm in Grand Junction. I'm working out here and down south in southern Colorado and in northern Colorado. My God, I don't have any time to get over there and assault and trespass. So long story short, that rolls around and Brad's like, well, I'm going to get you on assault. And I was like, no, you can't. I wasn't there. I'm going to get you on trespass. No, you're not going to get me on that either. I wasn't there. And then finally, he's like, well, I'm going to get you on something. And that's literally what he said. And there's a recording of this. And he's like, I'm not going to get tromped on by this guy. He's just mad at me. It's like I stole his girlfriend or something. And it was that bad. I mean, you could hear the recording when we went to trial. And I'll get to that here in a minute. But anyway, so that turns into, they turned that into 3 months later in June. I don't know how they did it, but they just lie and turned it into a trespassing charge. And then because I told Brad Porter over the phone to stop calling and harassing me unless he provided his oath, his bond, and his identification to confirm that he's an officer of the law acting within his authority, because he was acting irrationally. Like I said, he was a really hostile. It's even recorded. It's on the recordings, and he's just out of his mind. I mean, so long story short, I'm like, hey, listen, I texted him, don't bother me anymore. And I blocked his calls because he was really, you know how people are. You're just like, I'm not dealing with this. You can text me the proof of who you are. Otherwise, I'm not contracting with you. And that, by the way, is law. You're supposed to provide, as per Colorado statute. And I put it all in there. As per federal statute, you have to have an oath to the Constitution, an oath for the people, by the people, and we the people. And then, of course, to your job, to your office, to the Constitution. State and federal require this if you're a civil servant. He refused it. So I noticed him. I said, listen, if you don't do that, you're breaking the law, right? First of all, you're not going to contract with me, and you're breaking law. That's a criminal act. That's a criminal act. And I gave him these laws right here. Those are some of them that are part of that criminal activity. So with that said, I didn't hear from him for, this is back in March of 2025. And then I get assaulted, arrested, and kidnapped, ransomed. And true, there it is. Brad Porter says that I bribed him and trespassed. Said he'd get me on something. He was trying to get me on something. So the trespassing charge obviously was thrown out by the DA, right? But that's because I made a federal filing claim. I made a federal filing in September 22nd of 2025 to counteract the trespassing and bribery charge. I did it in the correct sentence structure, communications, parse, syntax, grammar, performance. And I did it in the correct, giving all my keys. But I also did it to help them. I put some of it in simple English, which I disclose as not of equity, right? It's just for informational. But things of equity need to be correct, just like a set of plans. You have to have your measurements, your materials, your keys, so that so that the homeowner gets what they want and you can basically be cost effective in your allocations. So if I told you I was building a 1,000 square foot house and then I built a 200 square foot house and you paid me the same, you'd be upset. Versus if I have you build out for a 1,000 square foot house and then you end up asking me to build a 2,000 square foot house with a 1,000 foot budget, that's not going to work either, right? So everybody has to agree on the same closure. Costs, materials, it always comes down to really just cost. Time, labor, energy, effort, materials, service, right? But the bottom line is, this is what everything's about, closure. And law is what? Contract. What's contract? Need. Closure. Each party has to be very clear on what the other party is obligated to do, or you have friction. War. Now, has anybody ever gone to war over a math problem? No, because that math brings clarity, right? Absolutely. So to get back to our story, I filed these case numbers from case DD0192025CR000077, June 20th, 2025, when I was arrested. I kidnapped, ransom, and arrested. I did filing RA 961-624-980 US and RA 961-625-115 US. And you say, Todd, why did you file two claims? Because first they arrested me and set me up on trespassing and bribery, right? So I filed a claim. We're going to go back here. So notice to homeowners, taped to the service door. This is our story. Christine was threatened on the phone. Todd was threatened on the phone. Todd was assaulted by police. Federal lawsuit filed by Todd, October 2025. It's actually September 22nd. And then 2 felony charges, federal claim, retaliation for my filing. They hit me with 24 felony extortion charges, 2 charges per unit of the people that they could find. And then nobody responded. So it was kind of weird. But anyways, so the federal claim, and I think it's because Karen Perez, the previous president, what she had done is she put in a puppet, this guy named Lucas Earl Hall. And Lucas Earl Hall took over being president for her after they lost their homeowners association regulatory and their licensure. And so, because he didn't live there, so that might help. And Karen Perez actually lives in one of the units. And that was the only point of contact any of his contractors had. And they all had to come to me because she didn't want to talk to anybody. And I had to only go to her. So that's what a lawyer does, right? It constricts information, communication, so they can have maximum manipulation, right? So my second federal claim gets filed. I file on the 24 extortion charges, which were literally cut and paste, and they were all coloring of the law. It's, I'll give you an example over here. So here are the charges. And what I did is I go through and I syntax it for coloring, right? So I do keys, adverb, there's a zero is a conjunction, and or, adverb, verb, adjective, pronoun, preposition, article, noun, past time, and future time. And that way you can start to get an idea of what they are. Now, just to give you an example, all the pink on the page is coloring. And I'll give you a simple example of it so you can have a knowledge or an understanding of how coloring works. If I say, you know, hey, meet me next week and I'll pay you $100, right? So you loan me $100 today. Next week comes and you're like, hey, Todd, where's that $100 that you owe me from last week? I was like, I told you next week. The truth of the matter is that kind of fiction you can get away with because it's not specific, right? Just like what they do. He feloniously and unlawfully committed to doing an unlawful act. What the frick does that even mean? You don't know what it means. That's the intent. It's so colored and irrational. It doesn't speak to anything specific. That way you can't say you didn't do it because it's so unspecific. It's like saying, Todd, were you at the lake last 10 years? What lake? 10 years? Where? Right? You were then. You were at the lake. You were trespassing. Telling you, man. That's it. That's how it works. I've done 100+ cases now, and I've seen it on every case. Coloring is rampant and as insane as this. So I highly recommend watching one of my videos on the coloring and how it works. But for now, we don't have time to get into that. But the bottom line is, so boom, we closed both claims uncontested. I filed both federal filings. It went uncontested. Which was lovely. It took me a while, but I'm able now to get proof through the court process from the courts that they do have these filings because they try to deny they have them or that they go uncontested. Now that we have them, proof that they've been submitted, they go uncontested. That's law. That's a beautiful thing. But what do? They call for a court trial, even though it's gone uncontested. They call for a court trial. They removed me from the docket. This is kind of a funny story. I'll make it quick. They removed me from the docket thinking I wouldn't notice and then put me back on knowing I was traveling. So I was traveling all around the country doing claims. And they knew, and they were tracking me. So they got me as soon as they got me to Vegas, they took me off the docket. They knew I was in Vegas. I was heading to San Diego and up San Francisco, Seattle. And I knew when I hit Vegas, I had some people looking in and found out I was back on the docket, right? Wasn't listed online, but it was on the docket. So I knew I had to come back in a spritz. So the next day I came back and it was on the docket and I had to be there. And when I walked into the court, Shamis, the judge, this judge on this is Keith Shamis and Inga Kazi. Inga Kazi signed my warrant for my arrest and assault. And Shamis then took over after I filed a lawsuit against her. So Shamis was like, "Oh, you were supposed to be here at 11." And I was like, "It is 11. I'm here." He's like, "Oh, no, 9 o'clock. You're supposed to be here at 9 o'clock." And the DA was like, no, don't talk to him about it, because it was 11. And we had proof. I had witnesses there in all my cases. Right. So he called the court trial. Next, he trial by jury set for one day. We had this set since like November, right? November of 2025, and then in January, which the court date was supposed to be January 30th, or January 30th, turned out to be the 29th and the 30th, and they booked them both back to back real quick, thinking I'd miss the 29th, right? But I showed up, and I knew it was all going to be just, it's all fiction, because they won't allow me to do anything incorrect in there. You won't allow any of the evidence to go in. They won't allow any of my witnesses. They wouldn't allow anybody to be in the peanut gallery, except that if I had some people witnessing in the peanut gallery regardless. But it's amazing. They separate everything. And then they had all their witnesses were gone. All they had was Brad Porter, the cop, and then Ryan Kelly, who's the chief of police, who I don't know either. He actually came out and tried to say I was a sovereign citizen. He was trying to get everybody in an uproar. He's like, these sovereign citizens like Todd Prophet are crazy. They think they're above the law. And just started ranting like he was part of the crowd, like getting people really hyped up, right? And I was like, hey, hold on. I'm not a sovereign citizen. First of all, it's an oxymoron. And I was like, what are you talking about? What are you doing slandering me from the peanut gallery? Who are you? And then he ran out of the room, and I found out later he was the chief of police that runs Brad Porter, who lied, cheated, and stole just rampantly, right? But then when I say that because I have affidavits to back it up. That's not me just saying that. I witnessed it. So did all my affidavits, all my people that witnessed that case trial both days. And those affidavits are right here. And those affidavits are also published on public notice. They've been published into the record, and they've been published in multiple counties, and they're online. So with that said, so trial by jury went. Show up for federal court because it's a federal filing. It is $1 billion case. It's a $211 million damages case, and it ends up being over $1 billion because we found the bonds, bid, appearance, and payment bond. And when I was in court, and I show everybody, hey, what's this? Let's check it out. Let's confirm it for evidence. This is factual. This is truth. And both DAs, because they had two DAs tag teaming me, not just one DA. They brought in three actually, and then left the cops in there and everything else, and the sheriffs, and they were in and out of the jury room, which were caught on video and pictures. And these guys were coming in and out of there, it's inappropriate, it's bad procedure. And then, of course, they were all talking to the judges behind closed doors, then coming out of those closed doors together, which is a total conference, which is illegal. And then, it just goes on and on and on. And then, of course, the demand for oath, bond, and identification. For any civil servant, you have to provide it. So they hit everybody's name. Took me a while to get everybody's names, but I got them all, right? Everybody except for Diamond, I don't know his first name. But that was one of the other district attorneys. But Terrence, I got Heidi S. McCollum, who's a district attorney not only in Eagle County, but also in Lake County and Summit County. So she's run multiple districts and she's corrupt. So no filing allowed by Mr. Todd. It moved to district court, first of all. They didn't think I'd notice, but it went from courtroom 1, which was a federal court, into courtroom number 4, and they snuck us down the hall, a separate part of the building, and then they went ahead and ran this court scam. Now, how can I call it a court scam? Because anytime you commit fraud or change things without notification, that is a scam, that is fraud, that is misleading, that's perjury, that's lies, right? It's not due process. If you don't allow me to put anything into evidence, nothing, zero zip. The only thing I could get in was a witness, 2 of them. And those 2 witnesses were both basically hushed. Nothing to be said. The DA just hammered them left and right, trying to pick them to pieces, and there's no pieces to pick there. So they just let them go. There was nothing there except for my saying, which was, "Hey, are we owed money?" And was a service provided, which was a notice. So how can a notice be a threat? And then, of course, on the bribery, how can we be? What did we request from the police in order to um, justify a bribery charge? And it's, well, we asked for his identification, proof of who he was. Well, fuck, that's. And then how can extortion be setting a note, giving someone a bill? If that was the case, then everybody's guilty of extortion all the time, right? But the bottom line is also done in adverb verb, and it was done in that vessel and dry dock. So they lie, cheat, and steal within that own little territory of theirs. And they do lie, cheat, and steal, and it's rampant. So when they came through and we finished up the case and I did the bonds, and I said, listen, here are the bonds. I've found the bonds in this case. I would like an explanation. They rushed me. They rushed everything down. They closed it all down. They took all of my files. I mean, everything. I had files in my car. I had files everywhere because I did over 800 and some pages on filings for this case alone, these two cases. And so they confiscated all of this information, right? They wanted to make sure that nothing could get out. That's the bottom line. All parties had to be quieted, including myself. That's why they put all these charges on me. So, and then after this, right, we get down to the end. No filing allowed by Todd. Took all of my documents, spyware on my phones and laptops. That was confirmed by T-Mobile when they had to wipe them. They all said that, the tracking and travel was real. And then the claim and the bonds, everybody denied they exist. The district attorneys, the police, the Shamis, which is Johnathan Keith Shamis, who is the supposed judge. But of course, how can he be a judge? He's an actor on a stage. Civil Rules of Procedure 44.1. And then on top of that, so when we finally get done with the entire day and I bring up the bonds, they rush them in. They do a not guilty plea, right? So they come back out. Is he guilty? He's guilty of 8 charges, which is all the witnesses they had was 4. Those 4 witnesses were Brad Porter, Karen Perez, who was the HOA president, lying, cheating, stealing. I think she took all the money from the coffers and ripped all the contractors off, including myself and the other people that I noticed with. And I believe that she took that money and ran kind of, and that's why she's trying to hush us up really bad, because she used to work for the DA and all those offices, right? So those are cronies. She thought she could get away with it, but no. But here's where it ends up. The sad truth is at the end of the day, they got me on 8 extortion charges, right? Same extortion charge over and over and over. It's 4 people times 2. How do you do an extortion charge times 2? When you serve 2 notices, but you didn't serve them, right? I mean, that's a huge hole there, but the bottom line is the big hole comes from the syntax. I have their signed confessions because when you see the coloring of the law on their statements, right, on their orders and everything else, when they're trying to subject you to, hey, you were at a lake last 10 years, and that's trespassing. That's not, no. That's coloring the law to oppress or otherwise just destroy someone's life. Take their life through prison or incarceration or fines, fees, and charges, right? So what it comes down to is I request the judge for orders, all docs, right? And how that works, and if you're ever in this position, you first do a cease, you do a case closure and release, right? Then you get into all this other stuff at the bank, which is your bill of lading. You get into I did a protection order and also a protection order and a restraining order against Brad Porter, Kelly, all those guys. And then you go into a request for certified document status, notice of record preservation. So what you have to do is you have to go through and confirm all the records that they have, right? So that's what I do. It goes through and does a bill of lading, has everything in here with regards to transacting with another business. A bill of lading, which is a bill, payment. Say, hey, listen, you owe me this. And then a bill of exchange is, hey, I'll exchange, we'll get this exchange going so we can settle or balance the books, right? So that's what all this stuff is at the end. You get it all filed, you put it in the court, you put it in the public record, and then they can't say that you didn't serve it. Now, the other big part I wanted to go over with you is the affidavits. So you want affidavits with regards to your story, other people's story, people that witnessed, right? So you stack your claim with affidavits. Now, if you only have your affidavit and you have my affidavit, then you're okay too. But you need at least two people to certify, and then get into. So the trespass, they can't get me on trespassing because I have a complete package here that not only gives you a claim of live life, it shows where I'm from, birth certificate, but it also gets into my oath of office. Because I have an oath of office as a plenipotentiary judge and as a clerk of the court and as a banker and a postman. Because this is what I do. I exchange, I transfer goods, I do contracting, I do commercial, I do transactional, and I do legal, lawful. Not legal, it's without God, but we use a lot of it. Sea treaties in here, CPAS, drug law, and of course, bill of good health, so that I can travel, into the harbor with my bill of lading, my CPAS, sea treaty, drug law, and communications treaty, so that I can actually communicate and do business with other vessels, whether they be in dry dock or wet dock. Okay, and then I'm going to get into the big part. So this is the bonds. The bonds that we find on our different cases bring the banking in. Now, when you bring the banking in, you say, Todd, what's that all about? Well, when they're taking a bunch of money out of your trust, pardon me, and they're basically robbing the U.S. Treasury and stealing it out of your account in your name, that's a bank robbery, and you are an accomplice unless you correct it. So when you witness a crime like a bank robbery, you need to notify all parties, right? But the most important thing is when you have a bank robbery, if someone's robbing you and then they're trying to claim that you've done something to them, it's void by ab initio, corruption from the beginning. So here's another one of our filings, 202-603-038. That's Eagle County. This is the final on this case. It has all the parties. It has the affidavit of record inquiry, which they ignored. Actually, they didn't ignore it. I got part of it. They have the certified records request. And I have my bond and my bond allocation in here. Okay. And then I also included all the shares of the bonds, how they've been performing. It's the Franklin Portfolio Fund. Everything, returns, dividends, the amounts per class. And then we did an evidentiary review. So this is how list of colored works: motion, moot, contract, district. District, actually, when you parse it, is demon god of trickery for court. Procedure is no contract word, PRO, no. Between and including, they are shooting 4-month window. That's not very accurate. That's that same thing I was telling you about. Hey, you were on my land between 2020 and today. Well, maybe I was invited on your land 10 years ago or 3 years ago, and you forgot, and I forgot. I don't know. I can't remember that far. But it's not specific enough to be a fact, right? You can't use broad terms and call it a fact. Hey, is the sky purple? On Tuesday, some Tuesday, maybe a Tuesday. Can't do that. It's like a set of plans. It's either 1,000 square feet or it's 2,000 square feet or it's 1,921 square feet. But it can't be, hey, yeah, like between 0 and 10,000. You can't do that because it is subjective to open interpretation, and anything open to interpretation can be mischaracterized because your experience is different than my experience. So we have to have closure. Closure brings claim, contract, fact, truth. Closure is fair and balanced and equity. Anything else is coloring and subjective to interpretation. And if someone wants to oppress you, if they're a mean person, they're going to do what they did in here to me, call it feloniously, unlawfully, tried to commit an unlawful act. And if you're a super fun guy like me, you're like, tried to commit a gracious, joyful, and loving act. What's the difference? All of it. Okay, so I'm going to finish up with the laws here. So this was Tana, Conlon, Ryan Kenny, O'Connor, Brooktree Townhomes, all the homeowners, Karen Perez, Brad Porter, Heidi McCollum, uh, Johnathan, Johnathan Keith Shamis, and Inga Kazi. Now, Ryan Kenny and Brad Porter are the two police. And I filed protection and restraining orders on both of them, but now we call them protection claim and restraining claim. A restraining claim is you can't come within 150 feet. A protection claim is keep them away from, if they make any claim on me, if they try to participate in anything with me, they have a problem. Okay. A restraining is just you got to keep them at least 150 feet from me. The protection is complete. It's like an umbrella. The restraining is physical. Okay. So with that said, we're going to get into the laws they break every time they do this bull honky of coloring the law and this fictitious conveyance and whatnot. Now, Title 42 USCS 1982 is to have knowledge and not stop and correct. To be told, like I'm telling them, hey, stop abusing me. You arrested and assaulted me. You're fictitiously conveying. That's coloring in the law. You're trying to put me in a hole and take away my freedom. And you're trying to scare my mom, elderly abuse. And you're trying to slander and abuse my friends and my contractors and subcontractors and other people I work with. That's not cool. And in so doing, that's knowledge to stop and correct. So you give them 21 days. If they fail to perform, then they fail to stop and correct. Now, FRCP 26-5, closure. That's what we were talking about before. I can't just say, hey, man, you were trespassing on my land. You got to say, like, well, you were trespassing where on the land? When? How? Why? What? Right? Specifics. You have to bring in the facts. If you don't bring in the facts, then you're just perjuring yourself. You're coloring the law, and you're fictitiously conveying false and misleading information to abuse another person, to do what's called rape, to force yourself on another person or force your authority on another, right? FRCP, B, fraud by confession. All of this stuff all the stuff that I had Brad Porter on, where he had an affidavit saying that I bribed him, disappeared. No more charge. All I have is that I have 8 charges of extortion from 4 people that don't exist. 2 of them are, I think they're fictitiously conveyed, John and Jane Doe, and then Karen Perez, who's just lying, cheating. And then it's proven she lied and cheated on the stand. She said those guys only worked there for a couple weeks, and yet we have proof of being there for over a year. And then she said it was just Todd and like another guy or something. It was like 36 of us. Come on, for like a year, right? And then Title 29, Section 701, 1964 Civil Rights Act. And that one is a big one because that one is where they contract with the feds, with the federal, which is the money. Postal owns the port authorities, which own all the dry vessels or control all the dry vessels in dry dock. Port authorities are run by the post office. Post office also owns the U.S. Treasury. They also own the military and run the military. But everything's postal. Bern, Switzerland is the United Postal. It's the ultimate postal authority. And then all postal authorities under that, or every country has its own postal authority. And they have to do that to coordinate all the mail, but more importantly, coordinate all banking, finance. Okay. Title 18. So anyways, on Title 29, Section 701, 1964 Civil Rights Act, if they can't handicap you. So if you're in doing, and this is the final filing I do. I do this one. And I go in, I state, hey, listen, you agree to bring in a translator if I don't speak English, right? So that we can communicate, so that we're on a level playing field of understanding or of knowledge, so that I don't get cheated and you don't cheat me, or I don't cheat you. So we don't lie to one another. We're on level communications, or you don't handicap me, right? They have all the handicap ramps and everything else. That's federal. So since they have that treaty not to handicap you, and yet they're fictitiously conveying language, they're breaking their own law, right? They're breaking their own treaty. So that's the one I get them on at the end. Title 18 USCS 1001 1002 is fictional communication. What's fictional communication? Is when you say like 2 + 2 = 4 and it's TO + TOO = FORE. You don't know that I said that. it's a play on words, but legalese does that all the time. Like no trespassing. There's no condition of state that exists that's no trespassing. There's either trespass or go somewhere else, right? Title 15, USCS 1692E, false and misleading statements. My goodness. He fictitiously, fraudulently, unlawfully decided to commit an unlawful act. That is a false and misleading statement. That's exactly what they put in mind. And when you stack it against the actual statute, which is statute's not a law, it's under the, just under corporate law, because they're all little corporations, right? That little vessel and dry dock, it's an actual, just a corporation named Eagle County, Colorado, or people of Colorado in Eagle County, or whatever, right? Those are all little private fiefdoms, and they're corporations, and those corporations have statutes. Kind of like I do for all, our companies, we have different policies, like, don't, uh, don't, well, I hate to do, don't such an, I hate negatives. Negatives and double negatives set you in a negative environment. So what we do is policy and procedure begin at 7 a.m. and work until 4 p.m. with a 1-hour lunch break, right? That's a policy and a procedure, right? Park in the parking area or park on the street. Please don't park in other people's, territory or whatever, right? And of course, show up on time, turn in your time cards at the end of every day at 3:30 so that we can process you. Stuff like that. That's policy. Just like policy for them is they call statutes. And their statute actually says if you have violent intent against another, or you have a physical intent to harm another, right? The proof of that is through abuse, physical abuse, either through bruising or through, some other type of physical damage that's obvious, right? That's subjective to that, whether they push you down and you're injured or how it does, or if it's emotional or psychological abuse where you're threatening people to the point where they're crying or whatnot. That's like violent tendencies. But in my case, it was they took it from violence or an act of violence upon another through bruising or whatnot into he fictitiously conveyed a felonious, unlawful act, which has nothing to do with the original statute. So that's false and misleading all the way, because not only is false and misleading away from the statute, it's false and misleading away from everything, right? It doesn't even get close to the statute versus the law. So Title 15, USCS 78FF, that's a $25 million fine. And that's for fictitious conveyance, like we're talking about. So it's grammar. If you don't have correct grammar and you're using it to rape or abuse someone, and then you have Title 42 USCS 1985, conspiracy civil. If you and one other or more persons intend to put me away or try to put someone away or try to lie about someone, if two people or more try to get together and abuse you, that's conspiracy. That's civil. Financial. Title 42 USC 1985, 2, obstruction. So when they didn't allow any of my paperwork in, none of it. That's obstruction. Title 42 USCS 1985, 3, deprivation of evidence. They didn't allow one document of mine in. And even when I brought in my documents and held them up to the DA and the judge, Shamis, the fake judge, and I was like, listen, here it is right here. Look it up on your computer. I mean, if you don't believe me, this is real. And they just deny it. And I crossed Brad Porter 7 or 8 times. It says in the affidavits on the people that witnessed it. And they're like, he just kept lying about his oath, bond, and identification. And Todd would ask, you don't know what an oath is? Nope, don't know what an oath is. You don't know what a bond is? Nope, don't know what a bond is. Then how can you possibly be a civil servant when it's the triad, which is an oath, bond, and identification or authorization, which gives you the right to work on behalf of, for us the people, for we the people, for the community, right? To serve and protect. And he's like, well, I don't know. I don't know what an oath is. I don't know what a bond is. Just total denial. They're the whole mentality is deny, deny, deny. Always stand on denial. Never admit to anything. It's always deny. And same thing with the judge and everybody else, the district attorneys. By the way, they have to provide that. So RICO, Title 18 USCS, is RICO, racketeering, influence, corruption, and organization. That act has taken down everybody. Al Capone went down on that one. You know, all these people who couldn't be brought down, RICO brings them down. So RICO's good for this, and everybody's involved. Title 18 USCS 242, coloring of the law. That's the big one we've been talking about. If anybody ever tries to abuse you or use their authority to rape, pillage, or otherwise pirate from you, that, my friends, is coloring of the law. Coloring of the law is taking a statement and tweaking it to make someone else look bad. Slander. Title 18 USCS 3, criminal participation. Now, criminal participation means that they're getting something out of it. And I've proven that these people are getting money out of it, right? Bond. They're getting money. It's all about grift. And then we have Title 42 USCS, 1983, personal damages. My personal damages to date is about 6 years of my life and being arrested, incarcerated, harassed, slandered, threatened, assaulted, and then, of course, you know, ruining credibility, slander and credibility issues in the town of Vale, and people, you know, harassing me and whatnot. And that's, you know, I don't mind. I do mind. I don't mean that. But the bottom line is I will stand and I will get it taken care of. Bullies always lose sooner or later. All you have to do is stand up for what's the correct. And sooner or later, they always collapse. Because fraud you can only stack so much fraud on top of fraud before the whole thing comes down. It's like building a foundation. If you build a foundation on sand and you go up 6 stories, that thing's going to collapse. I was at the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it leans like this. And it's amazing because they built such great foundations back in those days, these huge granite blocks. So it still stands, even though it's leaning like that, right? If any American built thing, actually probably Mexican built now here in America, it's falling apart, man. It's not even a story, and it's an year old, right? So Title 18 USCS 1512, obstruction of the law, ailing and corruption from the beginning. That's what ailing means, corruption from the beginning. And the bottom line is, like my case, started out with, how did it start out? A guy calling me up and harassing me, claiming to be a police officer, but refusing to provide his identification. Refusing outright. You better do this or I'm going to arrest you right now. That's literally, it's just 20 calls in a row, man, right when I was at work, over days. And all I kept saying is, please provide your identification, your oath, and your bond to confirm you are who you say you are. And if you put me in a liable situation, I have risk management. I can sue you. Because that's why you have a bond or insurance or risk management as any licensed professional, as I do as a builder, as I do as a law consultant, as I did as a professional stuntman, as I do as a driver, as I do as this, as I do as everything. Everybody has insurance or a bond or some type of ability to exact accountability if they mess up. Because we all mess up. Everybody makes mistakes. And civil servants are literally in the public, serving the public, so they must have. It's part of the, like I said, the triad. And we went over that earlier. So that's a part of it. It's both federal and it's state. In every state, there's a statute. And in every, of course, federally, there's a, you have to sign, you have to do an oath to the Constitution. I, will, look after the people and, whatever, look after the Constitution, follow the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, this, that, and the other, right? All right. So alien and corruption from the beginning, that always turns into a writ of de novo with us. Thank you for joining me. I know it's been a long one. And just to kind of wrap things up, this is the process for the last 6 years on this case. And now here on Monday, which is March 30th, they're trying to pull me in one last time for sentencing, even though I requested all the documents, don't have any. And then they sent over a small list of what they do have. But the beautiful thing is, what I've learned out of all these different cases, especially this one, is the more they try to squash you, we've come up with more and more remedies, but and more hat tricks for their tricks and traps. And the bottom line is they're constantly trying to contract with you. And this March 30th, this sentencing hearing that popped up but doesn't have anybody putting on the order, that's one of those traps. So how do you deal with all those trips and traps? And a lot of my clients, are nervous about how that works. And by all means, it's stressful because they're so abusive and they threaten you with so much ridiculousness, like 24 felonies for serving a notice. And it wasn't even me who served the notice. That it's hard to even wrap your head around. And what it is shock and awe. They try to get you so scared that over a freaking $1 traffic ticket that you're willing to pay, $100 because you just want to get out of facing these criminals in court, right? And they are criminals. This is criminal behavior, and it's racketeering RICO. So with that said, I'm going to leave you my next filing on March 30th, which brings my 6 years in my education to completion on this billion-dollar case, March 30th, 2026. I hope you've learned some from this, and I hope you can get a takeaway of this on how it might help you in some of your future cases, claims, or endeavors. Again, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next one.